This week, coming to you from the Vienna Inn in Vienna, Virginia, it's the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyszynski of the Connection Newspapers, and this is Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers, and we're here to talk about a multitude of topics tonight on the Fairfax Sports Report. We got field hockey, we got basketball, a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of gymnastics.
I'm glad you added gymnastics.
Well, gymnastics is a very viable sport.
It is.
In the eyes of many of us.
Sure.
Absolutely. All right, before we get going, I want to thank the folks that make this show possible every week. And we are, of course, talking about the fabulous underwriters for the Fairfax Sports Report, Quality Care Ford Service Center, servicing all makes and models.
Even your Ford Festiva.
Indeed,
right?
703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs. If I needed an I'm with Stupid t-shirt, I would go to CCI Screen Printing. 703-978-0257. And, of course, thanks to the Vienna Inn, Maple Avenue in Vienna, 703-938-9548. It's a fantastic facility. We love this place.
In Vienna.
And it's in Vienna.
Yeah. Make sure
as we mentioned. That's right. Vienna, Virginia, for that matter.
Not Austria.
Now, before we get going with some of the basketball and such, it's an out-of-season sport. Well, let's talk about it anyway. There's a brewing controversy in the world of field hockey. And what it has to do with is sort of the trend that we see in high school sports of cover your own behind.
Right.
The governing body for field hockey for high schools wants to institute a mandated rule that would go into effect in January of 2006 that would require field hockey players to wear goggles or some sort of eye protection, much like in the vein of what they did for girls lacrosse last year. So my question to you, my good friend Jeff, is, do you think it's a good idea? Is it warranted?
Based upon the games that I've seen this year, I mean, balls that travel, 5-6 feet in the air, not too common, but I have seen, strikes where it has been close. It's missed an arm, it's missed a neck or something. I actually do think it's a good idea. It's something that, it's probably better to do it now before somebody does, get hurt. Somebody's going to, lose an eye eventually. Lacrosse, I thought it was a good idea. The ball in field hockey is harder than it is in lacrosse. So, if the chance, it's better to not take a chance and have someone, suffer a, debilitating injury. So, I guess it's a good idea.
I think what we're talking about is two sports that have intrinsic differences in the way they're played. Right. In girls lacrosse, you're talking about balls in the air. Right. You're talking about having to swing the stick a lot. Even on every shot, you have to swing the stick.
Right.
In field hockey, you're looking down all the time.
Right.
Granted, sometimes the ball's going to bounce up maybe and hit you in the eye. Sometimes a stick is going to hit you in the eye on a shot. But overall, I think you're talking about a sport where most of the action is on the ground. To me, this is just completely over-legislating a sport. There's absolutely no need for goggles in field hockey. There just isn't. We both have seen an occasional stick swing high and hit a girl in the face. Occasionally a ball will jump up off the well-maintained dirt field and hit a girl in the face. But overall, it doesn't happen very often. And quite frankly, if you're going to mandate goggles for field hockey based on what you perceive to be a bunch of eye injuries that are going to happen, what do you do for basketball? How many times have you been at a basketball game and seen some kid get nailed in the grill by an elbow or an errant pass? Are we going to start? Should we put up this safety netting all over the place? In other words, should we just have these kids play in those sumo outfits that they used to wear at halftime of the Nets games? Honestly,
there are sports
where does it end?
There are sports that compare. Baseball, pitcher. Should you put up a big shield in front of him, so he doesn't catch a comebacker in the face?
Yeah.
It seemed like a good idea for lacrosse, like you said, because the balls are flying in the air. I think the one thing that would benefit them, like people talked about in lacrosse, is if you're going to enforce the rules, make sure that kids aren't swinging, the sticks at people's heads,
Right.
And you don't see a whole lot of that, in field hockey. So
I don't know.
Take it or leave it.
I agree with you on girls lacrosse, though. I think it was warranted. That's a sport that's sort of dangerous, and especially when you look at the headgear the guys have to wear.
Right.
It's sort of a nice meet 'em in the middle sort of thing that they only made the girls wear the goggles because they could have put them in the goalie masks that the guys wear. So I don't know. I just think it's sort of a cover your own butt sort of thing, trying to avoid a lawsuit that hasn't happened yet. And
it'll be interesting to see what kind of contraptions they come up with, because I know when we saw the lacrosse mask for girls initially, we were kind of like, what the
we
heck
didn't
is
know
that?
what it was.
What is that?
I didn't even see it. It was like a little shrunken catcher's mask.
Right. Who knows?
Exactly. Oh, there you go.
Maybe football helmets. Maybe they'll try that and then pare it down.
And go from there. Before we get to basketball, let's touch on two sports that are ongoing and getting closer to the postseason. I'm talking about gymnastics and wrestling. Let's talk about gymnastics first.
Okay.
What's your take on the season so far, and what do you think? Where do you think we're headed as far as some teams to watch and some girls to watch?
Well, most of the district tournaments are going to be coming up. Last year was a pretty good year for gymnastics in the region as a whole. Langley actually went on to win the state championship in a sport on the state level usually dominated by the Virginia Beach teams. Langley graduated pretty much everybody off their team, so sections aren't expected to contend this season. As far as the Concord district, Oakton and Chantilly are the top teams to beat. Chantilly has two really great standouts in Terrence Sanders and Valerie Voorhees. Oakton, who's probably been the most consistent team the last 3 or 4 years. Their coach Mike Cooper has won 6 state titles with Lake Braddock. They're probably going to contend this year. I think the real team to watch, as far as the region's concerned, is Lake Braddock.
Okay.
Cooper said that they have probably the most talent overall, and they put up, I think, the highest score so far in the region. Robinson's always pretty good. Woodson this year, Cooper actually coaches 3 teams. Oakton's one of them, Woodson's another. So he has a chance to win 2 district titles this year. They're a team to watch out in the Liberty District. So.
And in Lake Braddock, you're talking about one of the programs. I mean, you talk about programs in different sports that have a rich tradition.
Right.
We always
that is the
gymnastics program, basically, of the Northern Region, perhaps even the entire state.
Right.
So it would probably be no surprise that they still have the gymnasts coming in. And aren't there a bunch of former Braddock gymnasts that are coaching with Mike Cooper this year?
Yes, I think he has 2 former ones. Sarah Spring's one of them, and she was great
state
gymnast.
champion.
She was a state champion. Her brother Justin Spring is doing gymnastics collegiately. So that probably is the top coaching staff in the region. And Oakton's always a team that usually, I would say, performs better in the postseason. I mean, I think 2 years ago they lost their top gymnast, Christy Swanson, still managed to finish second overall in the region, went on to states.
Right.
So they usually step up their game in the later weeks.
Now let's touch on wrestling for a second. There are only 2 things that I know about wrestling, Jeff, for sure.
Professionally,
well, first of all, you can reverse the pain on a figure 4 leg lock by flipping over on your stomach.
Okay.
It's true.
Right.
And then the other thing I know is that the Northern Region has a heck of a time winning state titles. Now, last year we had one. We had Peter Russian at 160, who won a state title from Lee. Great story, great kid, and he came out of probably the toughest weight class in the region to win at states. And then we had another kid from Robinson, Lewis Dixon, at 171, who came in second. Now, this year, there are a number of people who may have a shot at a state title. I want to spotlight a kid by the name of Chris Hummer from Hayfield at 112. He finished 6th at 103 last year in the state, and he is a contender. Mustafa Ibrahim is a kid that I am fascinated with as far as his technique, his dedication to the sport. He wrestled at 103 last year, finished 3rd in the state, has a chance again at 119. Moving on, there's a couple of other kids I wanted to just spotlight. And,
TC Sam O'Hare. He's at 171. Yeah. He was undefeated up until I think last week. So he's another kid that could.
Ben Haynes from Herndon, 4th last year at 152, and he's at 152 again this year and currently ranked number 1 in the region. And then of course Sam O'Hare, like you said, 171. He was 3rd in the state last year. And one other kid to obviously mention, Robinson's Brent Jones,
right,
215. 3rd in the state last year. He's back at 215 this year.
He got, like usual, off to a little bit of a late start, like he was, I guess the past couple of years with Robinson going deep in football season. He's a top defensive lineman.
And obviously the story with Brent, he's a kid who's already committed to Virginia to go wrestling, and he was upset in the state tournament last year. And you talk about a kid who entered that tournament with incredible expectations on him, who a lot of people assume was almost a sure thing to at least get to the finals. You can pretty much count that he's going to have a lot of motivation when he gets to the state tournament this year. Again, assuming that he does. We don't want to say any guarantees here, but he's a kid that should definitely be a top contender for a state championship.
Like we said, when you look at the region, I mean, I don't think any team goes in there expecting to win a state title. Usually they hope for a top 5 finish. But I think last year, like you said, Russian probably was a surprise. If you would have said, pick 5 guys who could win a state title, I don't think Russian would have made the list. He didn't win a district title, didn't win a region title at that weight, but somehow he was able to. Some of the other guys who you would have thought to didn't win, but watching them come back this season.
Yeah. And from a team perspective, obviously Hayfield's always the team to watch. Robinson's always the team to watch. Brian Hazard, the coach at Robinson, said that West Springfield is on his radar screen in a big way as far as being a potential regional champion. And although they won't vie for a regional title, I think it bears mentioning that the coach at Yorktown, Noel Loban, mentioned to me that those mighty Stort Raiders are going to be contending for a national district title in wrestling. And anytime you get Stort in the title picture, I think it's worth mentioning.
You're certainly not going to see him in basketball in title pictures.
Well, Captain Segway, now that you mention it, let's look at some of the basketball scores in the past week. As we go through the northern region, you see Chantilly. Oh, look at that. You don't even know that was... did you know that?
No, I didn't.
You're very clairvoyant. Chantilly 57-42 over Stort. Falls Church over Edison 55-53.
And Edison, that's probably not the greatest loss for them. They're probably the second best team in that national district, so they can't afford to be losing games.
No, and a bit of a surprise.
Especially if they want to hang with Westfield.
Actually,
Wakefield.
I didn't see that score. That's a bit of a surprise. I'm actually kind of shocked by it. I was at that Hayfield-Braddock game, 49-44, in a game that twice Hayfield had pretty substantial leads. This game is always insane when they play it at Braddock. I don't understand what happens there. Fouls get called that I don't see.
Bottles get thrown from
It's just insane. Both
everywhere.
Mike Freeman and Britt Kelly fouled out for Hayfield last night. It was the usual chaotic atmosphere with the crowds battling back and forth. But Hayfield really showed last night, I think, why so many people consider them to be a serious challenger, not only for a regional title, but perhaps even for a state title. Their starting five is as good as anything I've seen in the northern region in a long time. Last night with Kelly and Freeman fouled out, Ray Davis took over the game and played extraordinarily well. Antonio Heyman played extraordinarily well in the post when you didn't have Freeman there to kind of help him out rebounding-wise. So Hayfield is an extraordinarily good team, and they really showed their mettle. But that being said, Lake Braddock could have won that game last night if they weren't ice cold from the floor in the first half.
And Lake Braddock is a team that likes to play more slow pace. They know they don't have the talent to keep up with the Hernans, the Hayfields, some of these better teams. For Hayfield, they've won 8 in a row, and like you said, they are a team that normally doesn't start off great. They usually save their best for last.
Right.
And maybe from top to bottom, they were probably deeper than they were last year. I know they had Alex Woodhouse last year, so maybe not the star potential up top as they had in the past, but like you said, probably one of the best balanced teams.
And it's not revealing any state secrets to say that that's a team that clearly knows where it's headed. I mean, Hayfield's eyes are on the district tournament, the regional tournament, and the state tournament, and sometimes you can see it in the way they play. I don't want to say a lack of motivation, but not necessarily the sort of focus that they're going to have come playoff time.
Right.
And a couple of times last night they got caught and allowed Lake Braddock to come back in the game. And again, Braddock is a very, very good team. It's not going to shock anybody to see them go on a long postseason run, especially if they're able to shoot the ball, which they just weren't last night. Getting back to the scoreboard, want to move on here. Mount Vernon 60-42 over Washington Lee. I saw WNL a couple weeks ago, and I thought they were a little bit better than 60-42, but evidently not.
Yeah, not that game.
Not that game. Moving on, T.C. Williams, 61-58 over Annandale. It's a pretty big win for the Titans, who have sort of been up and down this year a little bit.
That's a close one. T.C. has a real tough contest with Westfield coming up on the road, so T.C. is going to have their best game if they want to knock off the Bulldogs.
I talked to Wakefield coach Tony Bentley earlier this week. You see 61-37 over Yorktown. I think there's a real sort of concern on the part of Wakefield. Not a concern, but they identify the fact that right now, even though they're undefeated, even though they're ranked in the D.C. metro area quite highly, that there still is that stigma of, well, you're a national district team. And I think this season might be the season where we see that serve as motivation when they get to the regional tournament, that they have to win. And finally prove themselves that it's not a fluke to be undefeated at this point in the season, that they are a quality team.
And they picked a good year, too, because on the girls' side, Edison could very well be, the Northern Region champ by the end of the year. So
right.
You have 2 teams from the national district with title aspirations, and that's a good thing for that district.
There you go. All right, back to the scoreboard. West Potomac over Robinson, 41-35. West Pot trying to get into that sort of mid-range in the Patriot District. Right now, they are trailing Annandale and Springfield to finally get up into that sort of 4-5 area, where it's probably where they want to be.
And Robinson still has 1 win overall in the region, so the Rams are looking to, I guess, they're just trying to pick up a victory at this point in the season.
And Westfield with an easy one there, which is that a surprise or?
Not really. This is a rival game, and it was about a 12-point game the first time Westfield and Centerville played. Last night, Westfield put the game away in the first quarter. Their 5 starters each scored in double figures. So Westfield, another perennial contender, and like a team like you said, balance. I mean, when you have 5 starters scoring double figures, 12 of their 14 players scored overall. So that's another team that's very deep and can play a lot of different styles of basketball. So I wouldn't be surprised if Westfield and Hayfield matched up, in the playoffs, depending on how things kind of shake out within the district.
It'd be an interesting game, and I'm sure there are a couple other teams in the region, namely one over at Woodson and one over at South Lakes, that might want to have something to say about that, and a kid over at Herndon that might have something to say about it too. I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Scotty Reynolds and the week he had. I mean, obviously the amount of points he's put up against quality teams. I mean, what do you think he's a kid that can go? We talked about it briefly today, actually, in the office. That could go to the regional tournament and sort of do what we saw Elena Kashansky do for Chantilly a couple of years ago, and just take over a game himself and win a game.
I think he can. It would be really hard, I think, at that point when you get to the Patriot Center to completely beat a team by yourself, because you're going to be going up against a Wakefield, a Westfield, a Hayfield. But early on, he can do it. He scored 99 points in 2 games. This kid is a kid who I think scored his 1,000th point 2 games into this season, and scoring 100 points in 2 games. This kid has a chance to score 2,000 points easily. If he keeps up his scoring pace, he's averaging about 33, 35 points a game. So by the end of his career, he could be. Right now he's probably the most prolific scorer the region has ever seen. And This is including Grant Hill, and some of the other top players that have come out of here.
That would be 2,000 more points than I scored.
That's right.
To put it in perspective. Girls basketball.
You and me combined.
Exactly. Girls basketball scores from Tuesday and beyond. Annandale knocks off TC Williams 56-48. Chantilly 70-37 over Stort. Not a big surprise there, although Stort getting to 37, probably a little bit of a surprise.
That's good. And, usually they're covering around 25-30, so not too bad.
Edison with an easy win against Falls Church. Hayfield knocks off Lake Braddock. This is Lake Braddock's 2nd consecutive loss in the Patriot District. They lost to West Springfield last Friday night. Hayfield's Nana Phobie, boy, you want to talk about a game. 22 rebounds, 9 block shots. And although Abby Robertson scored 20 points for Braddock, obviously Phobie is trying to assert herself as one of the prime candidates for top post player in the Patriot District.
And, with Lake Braddock, Hayfield, Robinson, and West Springfield, that is the monster district of girls this year.
Yeah.
They're all beating each other. I'm sure they're, playing them twice each time. Teams are figuring out how they match up. So I wouldn't be surprised, if you see a lot of splits in those in those rivalries.
And it wouldn't be an understatement to say that it would be a huge shock if one of those teams didn't make it out of the Patriot District tournament. And they're the class of the district, in some ways the class of the region. It's going to be an exciting postseason in the Patriot District and beyond. Hayfield is a team that is loaded for bear. They are an extraordinarily talented team, especially in the starting 5. If they can keep it together and keep it consistent, they can make a long run in the postseason too.
Yeah, West Springfield's has been coming on of late. Maybe Lake Braddock takes a step back. Hayfield, I know they lost a couple games. I think midway through the district schedule that they would have liked to have back. But it's a great district. Liberty District's got 2 tough teams as well in Marshall and Woodson. So. More interesting teams on the girls' side maybe this year than the boys, but that remains to be seen. A lot of games to be played left.
Getting back to the scores, we have Robinson defeating West Potomac 60-45, and there you see Washington Lee 57-50 over Mount Vernon. Now W&L is an interesting team right now. They are sort of in the mix in the National District to host a first-round district tournament game. They're a very talented team, and I would not be surprised to see them make a little bit of noise, at least get to the regional tournament, but obviously with Edison in the district, probably not going to make too much noise. Edison is clearly the class of that district this year.
Right, and that's kind of an interesting thing. I believe the Nationals going to be matched up with the Concord. Concord usually is a pretty strong district, but this year maybe a little down. Oakton, Westfield, definitely the top 2 teams in that district, but the 3rd place and the 4th place teams are kind of yet to be decided. So if you're going to be hosting one of those 2 teams, maybe a Chantilly or a Herndon or a Centerville, that's a game you're going to want, I believe.
Right, and actually one more score to go ahead with, 61-42 Westfield over Centerville right there, and those are the scores, my friend.
And Westfield picks up the sweep on Centerville.
Is that true?
Good.
Wow.
Yes.
There you go. We've got a bunch of interesting games kind of coming up this week. I want to mention one off the bat. Thursday night, Woodson at South Lakes. Now, this game is obviously a huge one in the Liberty District. Woodson knocked off South Lakes in their first meeting, but as you know, South Lakes was a little bit short-handed that game.
Right. I don't believe Julian Vaughn was not playing, and I know
Right.
JP DePace's been kind of banged up and kind of working his way back. So
Right.
Seahawks weren't at full strength. Seahawks are always dangerous at home. They're they're definitely a team that feeds off their home
Right.
crowd. So that Woodson right now is 17 and 0, I believe. So it's going to be hard for them to go undefeated the whole season. This could be a game where they easily get knocked off for the first time.
It is. It's conceivable they could if they win this game, but like
Right.
you said, it's going to be tough. But let's not forget, Fairfax walked into South Lakes and beat them last week, and that was the first home loss for the Seahawks since they joined the Liberty District.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe times are changing. But I will say this about Woodson. I had a chance to watch them on Monday night against Lee. That's a super talented team. Nick Olivera is a kid who last year you could feel the weight of the world on that kid's shoulders when he was playing. And this year, it seems to come so much more easy for him. They've got great post presence. They've got great confidence in the court. They've got great coaching. That's a team that I'm not surprised one bit is having the success they're having. Although undefeated is a pretty big deal at that
Right.
school.
You wouldn't have expected that at the beginning of the season. You would have said, maybe Hayfield's undefeated, maybe Herman or something. South Lakes, I think another team that usually gets geared up for the postseason more than the regular season. They don't peak early on.
Right.
So I don't think Wendell Bird's too worried over there.
Right.
Even if they do drop this one.
And in South Lakes' case, I mean, you're still talking about a team that is pretty well firmly in place as being the number 2 seed in that district. I mean, you have Marshall kind of nipping at their heels, Madison, Fairfax now back in the mix, having played pretty well in the last couple of weeks. But they're going to probably be if they don't beat Woodson, they're probably going to be the number 2 seed.
And as long as you're number 1 or 2, that's where you want to be.
Right.
You don't want to be playing on the road. You don't want to, they can't afford to really slip up in the district tournament. But as long as you can get 1 or 2 seed heading into the district tournament, you've done yeoman's work.
Right. Tell me a little bit about Chantilly and Oakton coming up this Friday night.
This is a rematch from an earlier game. Chantilly took out Oakton. I think it was about a 6 or 8 point game. Chantilly coach Jim Smith said goodbye to assistant coach Chris Dukes earlier. I guess at the beginning of the season. This is his first year at Oakton. I mean, it's just a good rival game. Oakton and Chantilly probably two of the better crowds that you can go to. Oakton has a real small gym, so this is gonna be a great game.
Yeah.
And the girls' game, Chantilly's probably one of the top teams a couple of years ago, so that could also be a good game. But Chantilly, a team that really is kind of led by forward Greg Sy. He's their leading scorer. When he plays well, he draws defenses and opens up things for other people.
Right.
Oakton a little bit struggling with Chase Miller. I think hasn't been playing as well as he did last year. But I mean, Oakton another team who when playoff times come around, that's when they play their best ball.
Exactly. And speaking about girls basketball, Braddock at Robinson this Friday night in a huge game for both of those teams. I mean, you're talking about Braddock coming off consecutive losses in the district. Robinson is a team that obviously is an extraordinarily dangerous team. And also, you can't discount the fact that this class of girls at Robinson, I don't think has defeated Braddock in a district game. And this is the last time. This doubleheader, it's actually a doubleheader.
Okay.
Braddock and Robinson girls, then Braddock and Robinson boys. This is it. This is the last time these two teams are playing in a regular season Patriot District game, because Robinson is moving to the Concord next year. So it's a bit of history this Friday night.
There's probably more to gain in this game than any other. If Robinson were to take out Lake Braddock, that means Lake Braddock in its last 3 games against the big 3,
Right.
all 3 losses. So and they want to they want to try to bounce back, and a lot of gain, lots of gain for Robinson.
Right, and more than that, I mean, with 3 losses, it's going to be very, very hard for Braddock to maintain either the first or second seed with 3 losses. But again, like we said, I mean, there's such a disparity in that district this year. I mean, the bottom teams are probably not going to beat the top teams. It all comes down to what you do in the district tournament and the regional tournament for these teams. But the regular season games are fantastic, especially when you're jockeying for a position like those teams are.
And that should be interesting because the 3 and the 4 seed in that district, they're going to match up against Marshall and Woodson in the Liberty. So, I mean, it's really important for those Patriot District teams to try to get a 1 or a 2 seed going into the regional tournament.
Let's talk a little bit right now. We have a chance about teams that are sort of on the rise, that maybe we're sort of lying low for the first half of the season. we get down the stretch now. Fairfax is a team, in my eyes, on the boys' side, that is really starting to come into its own right now. You're talking about a guard by the name of Patrick Yu, who has played fantastic. He had a strong game against South Lakes. He had a strong game against Langley until he got hurt, and then when he got hurt, Langley scored like 30 points in the fourth quarter, which is pretty incredible. But you're talking about a team with a strong post presence, and JD Skolnitsky and Joey Lynch-Fiore, and then also with you in the backcourt. I mean, you're talking about a team that can make a lot of noise, I think, in the Liberty District.
And and they play in a gym where nobody really wants to play.
No.
And I mean, there's a bunch of teams out there where I think still trying to find their ways. Still, and a lot of teams have the potential to emerge this second half of the district schedule.
Right. And we would be remiss, by the way, if we didn't mention Steve Henry, who is one of our favorite people and a great legendary coach at Fairfax, will be leaving the coaching ranks to take the athletic director's position at Flint Hill, which is an interesting move for him. I mean, I imagine that this is probably an aspiration of his, and good luck to him. But I can't imagine that guy not coaching. He's just been an institution on the sideline.
And it's a good move for the Huskies. I know they have tremendous leadership over there, so it's about time for him to to kind of move out of the coaching ranks if he so desires, and kind of just sail off into the sunset,
so to speak. Thank you. One more girls' game that I want to talk about coming up this weekend, and it's sort of one of those games that's neither here nor there, but it could be interesting, which is Marshall at Lee. I mean, Lee is a team that is extraordinarily young, and I'm not quite sure if they're ready for a team like Marshall, but it's sort of one of those games that with Marshall playing as well as they are, you never know. And it's these games, to me, that when you have a team like Marshall that has a lot of talent on their side, maybe this is the kind of game where you look to see if are they focused, are they ready. It's not Woodson on the other side of the court. It's a team they're supposed to beat. And it's these games that sometimes you get a good gauge of where a good team is when you play a lesser opponent.
And like you said, Woodson's going to be matching up with South Lakes this week.
Right, same sort of
South
situation.
Lakes is the only team in the region that hasn't won a game so far, 0-16.
Wow.
So Woodson's at home. It's easy to say, hey, it's going to be a cakewalk.
Right.
It should be a 50-point victory. South Lakes is averaging about 25 points a game. Let's see if they're able to do that.
Let's see, and we shall see some good basketball here in the Fairfax Sports Network. As always, we want to let you guys know about some upcoming games. What is the game of the week, Jeffrey?
The game of the week is the Chantilly Chargers at the Oakton Cougars. This is a rematch, and I believe we brought this game to you at Chantilly about 3 weeks ago. So this should be a good rematch for the Cougars and Chargers.
Saturdays at 6 on Cox 35, and want to also... Oh, absolutely. And then we want to... Oh, thank you.
See if you enjoy them.
Fantastic. We want to also mention, of course, our Fairfax Sports Report coming to you Wednesdays at 10, Thursdays at 8, Fridays at 12:30 p.m. on Channel 10. And all that good stuff they have listed there and more. Fairfax Sports Network on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. We've got all kinds of airtimes, tape orders, general information, and more. I want to thank Quality Care Ford Service Center, servicing all of your makes and models. 703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs. 703-978-0257. And, of course, thanks to the Vienna Inn. They've been gracious hosts, and they're fantastic, and we love them. Maple Avenue, Vienna, and the phone number on the screen. And
the best dogs in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're going to have some dogs as we close out the show. Tell us about these dogs. What are on the dogs? Do you even know?
I do. They're actually turkey dogs made with very lean beef.
Very lean beef?
Which is surprising to most people because they're supposed to be the seafood of the end.
Right.
But they aren't.
Well, that's interesting. And tell me if I'm wrong. Did I detect a hint of mustard on these?
Just
There
a tad.
is. There's a hint of spicy mustard.
Fantastic.
Not just plain mustard.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next week.
Take care.